Welcome, y'all. Hello, and welcome to RobAnderson.live. This is episode 14. The only direction is forward. In this episode, we have two special guests on to talk about what we mean. Our first guest is Fred Guttenberg. Mr. Guttenberg, of course, lost his daughter Jaime at the Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School shooting in Parkland, Florida on February 14, 2018. We talk about how to even open the dialogue to addressing gun violence, especially here in the South. And by especially here in the South, I mean opening a dialogue, especially here in the South. After that, we have Erica Chu. This will be Erica's second appearance on RobAnderson.live, and we talk about medical treatment of African Americans in the United States. This has been an emotional week for all of us. As I record this, it's been just 2 days since Derek Chauvin was convicted of killing George Floyd last year in Minneapolis. We still have a long way to go, apparently, but it is gratifying to be able to see simple lessons of progress happen around us. We just have to keep fighting harder. We have to keep looking out for each other.
So first of all, on Stephanopoulos, he pronounced your last name Guttenberg. Is it not Guttenberg?
It's Guttenberg.
Okay.
People say it both ways, and as long as they can get out one of those two ways and it's not something else, I typically let it go.
Hey, good morning, y'all. Welcome to RobAnderson.live. Today I have a very special guest we connected on Twitter, oddly enough. With me here today, of course, is Fred Guttenberg.
My life focus is doing something about gun violence. Because of what happened to my family, I did write the book, Find the Helpers, which tells my story of moving forward following the murder of my daughter, but 4 months before that, the loss of my brother from cancer related to his service in 9/11. My brother ran the triage for the World Trade Center. So over a 4-month period, I lost two people I loved to a truly American tragedy in both circumstances. And so that's why I wrote the book, Find the Helpers, because of what happened to my daughter, established our foundation, Orange Ribbons for Jaime, which is really geared towards honoring my daughter's life and what mattered to her in life, educating also on why her life was cut short.
We have gotten to the point where the conversation doesn't even happen in districts like mine. It's not that we disagree, they're trying to take your guns or, each opposition, they don't even talk about it. Now, how do we get to the point where we can get both parties, since we are mainly a two-party system, to the table to say, we really need to talk about this? And
it's a great question. It is my great frustration that Fox News won't have me on for that reason, because I actually do want to talk to those who think they disagree with me because they don't know what I stand for. The idea that I'm looking to take away Second Amendment rights and send people in funny lab coats to everybody's houses to take all their weapons out is nonsense. That is not what I stand for. It's not what this movement stands for. The facts are we have 400 million weapons on the streets of America today, some in the hands of people who want to cause harm to themselves or others, and the vast majority, that's not the case. That is the way it is. Nobody's going around taking everyone's weapons. But we also have to acknowledge that there is a risk, that people's lives may be at risk. And because of that, we should be doing more to ensure our safety from gun violence. Okay? Gun violence isn't going away. It's here to stay. But we can do more to lower the gun violence death rate, to reduce the instances of gun violence, to reduce the severity of gun violence injuries when they happen. And that's what I talk about. So that's why things like background checks matter, red flag laws matter. We passed in Florida 3 weeks after my daughter was killed, after the Parkland shooting, gun safety measures. We passed red flag laws. We raised the age to buy a weapon to 21. We instituted a waiting period, and you know what? Not a single legal, lawful gun owner ever thinks about what we passed in Florida because it doesn't affect them. And that's what gun owners need to understand.
When they keep saying how in Chicago there's such a high rate of violence, not acknowledging, even though due to restrictive laws, not acknowledging that they could drive, half an hour to Indiana and fill up the trunk.
Yeah, but that's why you need to handle this at a national level. You're only as safe as your closest border. New Jersey, as part of their gun safety measures, has started evaluating where every gun used in a crime comes from. Almost 80% come from out of state, So the reality is, guns, there are certain states and certain communities that do less to monitor who is and who isn't buying their weapons. Guns also often get stolen, left out on the seat of a car, or get dropped, or they get traded and transferred. Again, responsible, lawful gun owners are doing things to ensure that doesn't happen. But there's too many people who, because it's so, of carelessness or lack of concern or criminal intent, allow bad things to happen. And we have ways to mitigate against that. I think everyone agrees with me. We should want to lower the gun violence death rate. We should want to decrease the instances of gun violence. So let's work together. This isn't to put gun owners against gun safety people into a constant fight. We should all agree those are worthy goals. Let's work together.
Let's open the dialogue. Why can't we open the dialogue? As you said, the first point you made, background checks. And I talked to individual gun owners here as part of my campaigning last year. And every time you mention a common sense thing, such as background checks, it comes back to any restriction on the Second Amendment is bad. They take an extremist point of view. That's what I mean. They're almost putting their finger.
Yeah.
And that's what I want to get past. It's like, excuse me, literally nobody wants to come seize all your guns. What we want is to start talking about the people who do know. I live in that region. It's a hunting region. So they'll say, well, they don't even know what they mean by assault rifles.
Yeah, I know. I've heard it all.
That shows that you're open to talk about real solutions. Because as you said, nobody in their right mind anyway is defending gun violence. Nobody is.
I understand.
How to prevent it is where we.
The A does not stand for assault. It's Armalite. I get that. However, they are used in a way that is to assault and kill as many people as possible. And after my daughter was killed, everybody said they really are just for hunting. Well, listen, they get used to hunt humans as well. And my daughter was hunted. So I get all that. The facts are having ways to mitigate against gun violence is not an affront to the Second Amendment. And anyone who says it is doesn't actually know what the Second Amendment says or what the Constitution does, because there's always limits for the public safety and the public good. Even Antonin Scalia agreed with that concept. So I've heard it all. At the end of the day, okay, we have to do something to reduce the public risk and threat from gun violence. We're seeing now how, especially because of the gun surge over the past year, the gun violence issues are even getting worse. This is not going to solve itself. And us talking at each other with old arguments isn't going to solve it. So we got to get this done.
When all you're doing is delaying even hearing the issue and just you're putting a tag on it just to make it sound good to your voters.
Yep.
They don't actually have convictions, most elected politicians that I know of, whereas public safety and the public health should be first and foremost amongst your concerns, your constituents.
Should be.
Yeah. And that's why I got into politics. So, and I am, in a Pro 2A district, but everybody I talk to says, well, yeah, I don't really have a problem with background checks. We just don't want them to start taking our guns. It's like, nobody's saying that. I'm talking about my neighbors, the actual people who do go hunt and fish, and that's how they eat, because we're in a poor district here.
The Indianapolis FedEx shooting last week. Have there been better, more substantive laws in place, and had even the laws that were in place been executed, then that shooting would have been prevented. The problem is their red flag law there was so onerous and required so many steps to do that even though this person was already previously deemed a threat, a mental health concern, had previously had weapons removed through their red flag law, he was able to still go out after that fact and buy more weapons. Okay. So, we should be able to avoid moments like that in circumstances like that. This is not rocket science.
At minimum, we should be able to enforce the laws we already have.
Listen, even in your part of town, everyone who complains about the federal government, they all utilize the parts of the federal government that they like.
I've lived in the very restrictive gun laws in Manhattan, and down here where it's literally, open carry. I don't have any objection to encouraging more background checks, more red flag laws, more ways of using information. Everybody you talk to around here, yeah, one-on-one, they'll agree with that. Sure, yeah, that makes sense. Crazy Jim down the road, he probably shouldn't have a gun. But when you're talking to outsiders, you're like, nope, can't take my rifle. So that dialogue, it almost seems like it has to come from within. So I'm wondering if it begins at home or if it's verisimilitude. I just wonder how to get people to actually start talking about it. That's really.
I think just by talking. I just think at some point you have to say we probably agree on a lot more than you think. So let's at least talk about this with each other, because there's only one way to find out. And I'll give you an example. Last year and a half ago, I actually had a 90-minute debate with Senator Ted Cruz. And it was in his office. It was me, it was Alyssa Milano, and another gentleman, Ben Jackson.
Oh, I heard about that one. Yeah.
Yeah. And in the debate at one point, when Senator Cruz went off, why we can't do more with background checks and this and that, and second, I just said to him, I said, let me ask you a question. Do you beat your wife? And he looked at me like I was crazy. And he said, no. I said, have you ever been arrested for any kind of violence against anyone? Are you a threat to anyone? Should anybody be concerned about you passing a background check? He said, no. I said, then what are you worried about? And he just looked at me stunned, but he didn't have an answer. I said, what are you worried about?
Exactly.
And that was it. But I don't think anyone else has ever asked him if he beats his wife. So
that's a good one for you.
And it was recorded. It was live streamed right out of his office. But I think it's important for people to see that dialogue, because this is not gun safety is not about removing rights, taking everyone's weapons and putting them into a ditch somewhere. It's just not what it is.
No, I like the way you put it there. It's, what are you worried about? Now, and the people who would be worried because they have beaten their wives and whatever may not realize that, you probably shouldn't have an AR-15.
If you are a known threat to commit violence, then yes, you should not. I would agree. I would say straight up, if you're a known threat, if you've committed violence before on others, you probably shouldn't be in possession of weapons.
Right. And just acknowledging that is you can't get them to acknowledge it. And I'm always searching for answers and talking to people to figure out how.
Listen,
what else? That's all.
And I hope people do listen, because there's nobody there who has weapons, who goes hunting, who uses them for sport, that should fear gun safety. Candidly, gun safety is to their benefit as well, because you know what? They could be shot in a random act of violence as well. Everything I do is about protecting folks in your community as well as any other community across this country. And that is the mission of gun safety. It's really simple. Lower the gun violence death rate, lower the instances of gun violence, and decrease the severity of injuries when they happen. Let's take steps together to do that. Homes that have weapons in them there's higher rates of suicide, as well as higher rates of domestic violence with a gun.
Let's stay in touch.
Yes.
I want to keep this issue moving forward down here. I'd like to force our local elected officials to start paying attention, since we're louder than a lot of them. So maybe we can do some good.
Listen, let's save lives.
Exactly. Conversation. By the way, this episode was brought to you in part by the help of our local sponsor, Blackbird Botanica. And this here is a mason jar of their Mungli tea. In case you weren't aware, this tea is made from a plant native to this area and has been used for the treatment of fever, chills, and any respiratory ailments by the traiteurs of Louisiana for hundreds of years. And recent scientific studies in 2014 by Pennington Biomedical, ULL, the USGS, and Rutgers University show that it actually works. Now we're going to see how it tastes. This is actual real life stuff. I haven't tried this yet. And as always, please remember to follow directions.
Now it's my pleasure to introduce Erica Chu. Erica is an activist, a blogger, a former paramedic, and one of my good friends. This is her second appearance on the podcast.
Well, yeah, I'm really glad to be doing to be back on RobAnderson.live this week, because it's National Black Maternity Mortality Week, and I just think it's really, really important to highlight that Black women are more likely to die in or immediately after childbirth than any other ethnic group. And the death rates are especially higher for college age Black women after they give birth than even a white woman with a high school diploma, or even a white teenager without a high school diploma is more likely to survive childbirth and after childbirth, like in the days after, than a college-educated Black woman. Part of it is the disparate outcomes that Black people continue to have in this year of our Lord 2021, and that's because medical bias isn't just it pervades every aspect of the healthcare system. You hear a lot of talk among the progressives about Medicare for all and how it's a panacea that's going to just take care of everything, but it won't address bias in medicine. In 2017, the American Medical Association did a survey of all of their graduating medical students. 25% of the graduating medical students, and this is med students from all across the country graduating, 25% of them in 2017 believe that Black people don't have nerve endings in their skin, so therefore Black people cannot feel pain, or they feel pain to a lesser degree. Now, a doctor who believes that, there is no universe, there is no circumstance that he is going to be delivering the same level of care that he will to a non-Black. It's just not going to happen. And that's one of the reasons why the health outcomes for Black mothers, even with prenatal care, it's why there's such a disparate outcome. Black women are more likely to suffer a syndrome called HELP, hemolysis, elevated liver, and low platelet count. It's a constellation of symptoms that's related to eclampsia, which is high blood pressure, and usually takes place immediately after the birth. So these postpartum new Black mothers, might be complaining of extreme headache, or abdominal pain with distended belly, and they're more likely to be written off as, oh, you're just tired from childbirth, or here, take a Tylenol. And by the time the medical staff realizes that these patients, these women are in trouble, they're circling the drain, and you can't get them back. It's happened so much, and it's underreported. And when we talk about disparate health outcomes, look at the doctor in the, Dr. Moore, Susan Moore. She was in Indianapolis a couple of months ago. She died of COVID, and she recorded on her phone how she wasn't taken seriously by the staff at the Indianapolis hospital where she was a patient, and she ultimately died. Okay, now this is a Black woman, well-respected physician, and she still can't get top-notch care for COVID. So imagine how the ordinary.
If a doctor is getting dismissive care, biased care, then the average working person has no shot. It's an uneven playing field.
Hundreds of years, we've been seen as less than and not worthy of the same level of care. I mean, do you know why the opioid crisis affected white America disproportionately to Blacks? Because when we ask for pain meds, we're believed to be drug seeking. But as Black people, we need to be more confrontational in terms of demanding that we get the same level of care that white America has historically gotten. That's a sad state of affairs. I'm not alone in having that fear. You know, I don't know if I told you this story, Rob, but I had a traumatic brain injury. It was a freak accident. Bought a sectional sofa in 2005. Was too cheap to pay for the $167 for the furniture store to deliver it, because at that time I was driving a Ford Super Cab. So I said, well, I'm gonna save my money and take the sectional home. So I got my neighbor across the street to help me unload the sectional. It got stuck on the lift gate, and I crawled underneath the lift gate to dislodge the sofa. He didn't know I was under there. He lost his grip, and the whole sofa fell on the back of my head. Whoa. So I had and smashed my head onto the cement. So I had what was called a coup contra coup injury, where your brain hits the front of your skull and then it bounces and then hits the back and then it bounces. So anyway,
double jeopardy.
So I was actually unconscious for a few minutes. So I wake up, I'm seeing the stars from, like the cartoon characters with the stars around my head. So he's like, well, let me call 911. And my mom is like, well, we got to take you to the hospital. I'm like, no, I'm okay. So by about 9:30 that night, I'm so dizzy, I can't even stand up, throwing up. So my mother drives me to the emergency room, where the white emergency room doctor, after hearing what happened to me, and at this point I'm literally throwing up and I can't even sit up because I'm so dizzy. He says, it's just a simple concussion. Take some Tylenol and you just need to get some rest. Anyway, later that night, I had a seizure, stopped breathing, ended up having to go to the doctor again the next morning. I went and saw my own doctor, and he sent me to a neurologist, a Black neurologist, who diagnosed the traumatic brain injury. So I ended up being on medical leave for almost 10 months, had to rehab, couldn't run calls. Because that's how badly I was hurt. So it was about a year later, done with the rehab, and I'm back to running calls. So I go to the same hospital, and as I walk in with my patient, there's the same white doctor who had sent me home the year before, telling me that I just had a simple concussion. So after I dropped off my patient, gave him my report, I walked up to him and I said, you don't remember me, but I was here a year ago, and I presented with a head injury and vomiting and whatnot. And I said, the standard of care, you should have admitted me because I was having these symptoms, but you sent me home. I don't know. Trump did not cause it. He made it worse. Biden can only do so much. Medicare for all can only do so much as far as expanding healthcare, but it won't change the bias, codify into law the disenfranchisement of the Black person. All of these Confederate monuments that Trump and the MAGA crowd want to keep. These statues, many of these statues were put up in the Jim Crow area. In the Jim Crow era to intimidate Black people. If you look at the school system, you've got cities like Baltimore, inner city schools, urban schools, where the school is a school to prison pipeline. Baltimore city schools in Maryland were so bad that at literally at one time, the longer you stayed in them, basically the worse you got academically. So you've got the 67-year anniversary of a landmark education case, before the Supreme Court coming up. And yet look at the state of schools in America. And not just disparate educational outcomes, but we had fire drills. We didn't have drills for mass shootings. But if you decide to go, your K-12 education should have prepared you to do the work.
It does not.
A lot of these, depending on the education level of your parents and how they taught you, your homeschool education isn't likely to do that. And then these kids, they run for office and they set laws for the rest of us. So you get a Todd Aiken, the congressman who a few years ago, who said that women can't get pregnant because they're being violently attacked, so the body could shut that down and not get
I remember, what is his name again?
Todd Aiken, he was the congressman.
I'm going to put a graphic up during the podcast at this point of that idiot. I remember that idiotic statement. The body has the ways of shutting it down.
Yeah, the female body has a way of shutting that down, so a rape victim can't get pregnant.
Merely because this episode, it looks like you'll be grouped with Fred Guttenberg, whose daughter, obviously, Jaime, was killed at Parkland. Has it come to the point where the sides, I guess is the way of putting it, don't even have a method to address the apparent epidemic of gun violence in this country? I don't even see a dialogue happening between Republicans and Democrats to simplify.
Because the Republicans don't want a dialogue. I knew that as a country, we weren't going to do anything about stemming gun violence after Sandy Hook. And those parents went up to Congress. I think they came to Congress about a week after Adam Lanza massacred the classroom in that school. And you have bereaved parents who have literally had to identify their kid with a bullet hole in their forehead. And they were begging and pleading with Congress to pass meaningful gun laws so that the next Adam Lanza can't stockpile guns. And nothing passed. The Republicans wouldn't do it. And that was the harbinger, the bellwether of what we've seen, which is nothing but thoughts and prayers. That's all Republicans want. They are happy with this being part of our diaspora, mass shootings. They don't want gun legislation. This is just a part of life in America. And Republicans, the 2A crowd, they're okay with it. And how do I know this? Because look at how many kids have died, how many mass shootings have we had since Sandy Hook? We've had El Paso, we've had Denver, we've had that festival in Humboldt back in the summer. We've had Las Vegas. We've had Stoneman, Jackson, where Fred Guttenberg lost his daughter. Dayton, Ohio. I mean, I've lost count and now, just before we came on, there was a workplace shooting near my alma mater, Hofstra University, at the Stop and Shop off of Hempstead Turnpike. It's part of life in America. And the Republican Party, the MAGA crowd, the 2A crowd, they're okay with it. And why am I confident in saying they're okay with it? Because they consistently come out against any legislation that would curb the violence. You know, look at New Zealand. After the mosque shooting, they tightened their laws for assault weapons. Australia had a mass shooting and their parliament changed the legislation so that it would never happen again. We don't. We offer thoughts and prayers, and then it's like the Jay-Z song, on to the next one. Yeah, exactly.
I had those same conditions. I missed a bench warrant. I was not considered a public threat. They didn't come to my house. They didn't come looking for me. They found me months later when I was walking to the library because they assumed we were dealing drugs or something. I don't know. Long hairs in Florida, but I don't know what. To have voices like yours who say all the things I mean to say, but you say them well. So thank you for coming on to our show again.
Thank you so much for having me.
Your interviews are so good. I only have to chop a few bits and drop them right in. So thank you for that. That helps.
How's Clarissa? How's your mom and your sister? You were in Texas a couple of weeks ago. Did you?
Okay. Sue, my sister, and my mom are both good. They're just now getting vaccinated. Texas was a little behind, but they're doing well. Clarissa and I got vaccinated a couple weeks ago. We're fully, we're past the.
Did your arm hurt? Because I got the Pfizer. on
Yeah,
Friday,
so did I.
and my arm was killing me for 3 days.
Oh yeah,
Did you have any
mine
side
hurt.
effects or anything?
The first shot we had arm pain and a little bit of fatigue. The second one pretty much kicked both our asses like a mild flu, for like a day, but only like a day for me. I think 2 days for Clarissa. So yeah, absolutely worth it. I still advocate for it, but yeah, that's pretty much the same experience everybody's having. Some arm soreness, and then it was, a little fatigue and funkiness, but look at the alternative. I'll take the vaccine.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm a big vaccine proponent. Well, thank you very much, Erica, for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. Choose truth because truth is the light. Issues of the day and pop culture and race, unfortunately.
Unfortunately,
and being black in a preferential white America. Yeah, now that you can quote. Being black in a preferential white America. It's different.
Yeah.
There's 3 Americas. There's one for the rich, one for the poor, and then there's Black America. Thank you so much for having me, Rob.
Always. And you're going to be one of my regular guests for as long as I do this. So.
Oh my God! Thank you so much.
It.
Thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am. All right.
Okay.
Say hi to your mom.
I will.
Hey y'all, I just wanted to drop a teaser for our Independence Day weekend crawfish boil. It's going to be July 3rd. Broussard, Louisiana. Keep your eyes open for updates and tickets going on sale. We'll keep you posted. Thank you once again for tuning in to robanderson.live. I'd like to thank my special guests on this episode, Fred Guttenberg and Erica Chu. I'd like to give a special shout out to our sponsors, Karen Homan Almeida, Melanie Ehrlich, Lisa Cronin, and of course Blackbird Botanica. I'd like to thank you for joining us on this little journey. This episode is the finale of season 1. We decided to take about a 2-week break here. We're working on format, how to message better to y'all. But we got 14 episodes under our belt, and as we spread word around, and you know what? Tell a friend. We get better at what we do. And we're coming back again. Season 2 begins just 2 weeks from now.